What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another Android format video, and in this video we're going to be discussing a deck that I really liked in previous formats, but I'm a bit less of a fan of here, which is Relinquished. Now, if you're not familiar with what Relinquished does, basically Relinquished is a ritual monster that's level 1, so it's very easy to bring out with Black Illusion Ritual. And basically, it can suck up your opponent's monsters and use them as equip spells, and it gains the attack and defense of that monster. And then if you take battle damage while it's equipped with a monster, then that battle damage is also inflicted to your opponent. Now, this can be a very tricky card for a lot of decks to deal with, as it is basically just removal, and also, if they try attacking over it and they've just got one monster on field, the equip card will be destroyed instead of this, so you can then suck up another monster next turn. However, I do think that it's gotten a little bit easier to deal with Relinquished, and I think that this format is sort of less suited to Relinquished as previous formats were. For instance, I think this deck is really good in Imperial Format, and I actually piloted this deck to a second place finish in the Imperial Tournament that we held on my Discord a little bit ago. If you want to join that Discord, link will be in the description down below. We are going to be having an Android tournament in June, so if you're watching this video and you enjoy Android, then you should definitely check that out. But while I think that this deck is really good in Imperial because it's a much slower format and Relinquished can get more value sucking up a set monster that could be flips, as opposed to the more aggressive beaters in this format, I think that this format being more aggressive makes it a lot worse. There are decks that this can be good against, and this can win a game against a standard good stuff beast spellcaster list. It's just a much more uphill battle than it was in formats previously. But hopefully the games I've got for you today with this deck will show exactly what I mean. Before we dive into those, though, let's just go over a quick deck breakdown. So we are playing 2 Relinquished, 2 Black Illusion Rituals, and then the 2 Searchers to get to these cards, 2 Senjus and 2 Sonic Birds. Now, the Senjus and Sonic Birds are kind of rough because your opponent can crash things like Mystic Tomato into them, and any of the sort of triangle of beaters here do get over them, so they are very vulnerable. But they are still pretty good at searching out the pieces that you need, and once you have them on field, they serve as ritual fodder for your Black Illusion Rituals, so that's pretty good. We also have a Sangan and a Witch of the Black Forest to search out any of these recruiters, as well as searching out our beaters in the case of Witch of the Black Forest. To search out the Sangan and the Witch, we've got 3 Mystic Tomato, which can be great at bringing them out, and are just great at preserving board presence in general. And then for the last of our sort of weakling monsters, we've got 2 Magician of Faith, which can be used to recycle our power spells, and also potentially recycle things like Black Illusion Ritual, which can be very important if your opponent uses Imperial Order on your first one. But oftentimes with Magician of Faith, you're just trying to get back powerful spells from grave. I think that this is a card you could potentially cut down on more, though, because things like Kaiku really do make Magician of Faith a lot worse in this format. Speaking of Kaiku, we've got our triangle of beaters here. 3 Kaiku, 3 Gemini Elf, and 1 Bazoo. You might think that this is a bit of a weird ratio, and the reason we do this is that part of Relinquished's power is just being able to bring it back from the graveyard consistently with things like Monster Reborn, Call of the Haunted, and Premature Burial, and using his powerful effect again. And Kaiku can banish the Relinquished out of our graveyard, can also banish our power spells that we'd get back off of Magician of Faith, and it's just an all-around annoying card. So we want to max it on Gemini Elves, which is the best out to Kaiku, and, maxing out on Kaikus of our own can crash the Kaikus together, so that can clear them that way as well. Having 3 Kaikus of our own also counteracts another big problem that this deck faces in the form of Skull Lair. Relinquished is a level 1 monster, which means that Skull Lair only has to banish 1 card from your graveyard to destroy it, and so these 3 Kaikus can be a great safeguard against that as well. 1 Bazoo is a little bit iffy, but we don't really have the space for 2. I mean, I guess we could cut a Magician of Faith for that if we want to go a bit more aggressive. But at least Bazoo is searchable off of Witch of the Black Forest, and so we do have easy access to it. Lastly, for the monsters, we've got a Jinzo here, which is a great search off of Witch, and can ensure that major pushes go through, even through your opponent's traps. For these spells, we've got the Black Illusion Rituals that I mentioned earlier, and then a bunch of just power spells. We've got a Change of Heart, Confiscation, Dark Hold, Delinquent Duo, a Heavy Storm, a Reborn, 3 Mystical Space Typhoon for our spell and trap removal of choice, along with the Heavy Storm. We got Pot of Greed, Premature Burial, Raigeki, and Snatch Steal, and the Forceful Sentry. Now, the spell and trap removal, you could potentially mix things up a little bit. The deck does hard lose to Imperial Order, and that shuts down your main combo pieces, so instead of the Mystical Space Typhoons, you could potentially go for some Dust Tornadoes instead, to try and maximize your chances of being able to clear IO. But the way I figure it is that the 3 Mystical Space Typhoon, if you have them in hand when IO is activated, you can use them up that way. So if you're able to like manage your resources well, it hopefully won't be as much of a problem. And this is much more reactive than Dust Tornado if you're going for an early powerful spell and your opponent does have the Imperial Order early on. So I do think that the Mystical Space Typhoons are better in the deck than Dust Tornado in general, but that is definitely something that you could switch around if you want to play the deck on your own. And then for the traps, we're only playing 3, Call of the Haunted, Imperial Order, and Mirror Force. We don't really have the space to play things like Jar of Greed or Skull Lair or any of those other cards. But those cards are very good, so I could see potentially cutting parts of this deck for them instead. For the side deck, we've got a Bazoo, a Magician of Faith. These are to bring in if you're going second and want to potentially side out some of the hand rips, because they are just very powerful cards in general. We've got 2 Noblemen of Crossout and a Ceasefire in case our opponent's on a flip focus strategy. We've got 3 Dust Tornado in case they're on a more back row focus strategy. We've got a Skull Lair just in case they're on a deck that loses to Skull Lair just like ours does. We've got 3 Solemn Wishes in case they're on burn, and we've got 3 Waboku in case they're on a bit more of an aggressive deck. Waboku could just be a consideration to include in the main deck in the future, because it does help safeguard you against something like Kaiku, so you might want to include it in the main deck. It also plays well with spell and trap removal, as you can chain it to that, just like you can Jar of Greed or Time Seal. But we've got it in the side for now, and maybe we'll see if it actually does come up in the games that I've played. But with all that out of the way, before we jump into the games, if you enjoy this sort of content and you're not subscribed already, please do subscribe. It really helps with the channel a lot. We're at around 640 subscribers. I'd really like to reach 700 by the end of the month, and if you subscribe, you can help make that happen. And if you do enjoy the video, as always, please do leave a like down below. But with that out of the way, let's dive into the games. First up, we've got a game against PJ Darkness, who appeared earlier on the channel when we were testing out the Momonga tech in the Beast Spellcaster deck here. So always a pleasure to have them on. Unclear what they're playing, but we're playing Relinquished, so let's see how this thing goes for us. We are going second here, which is a little bit unfortunate. Let's see if it's a big loss for us. Oh, this would have been a great going first hand. Wow, Comfy plus Duo. Oh, that would have been pretty great. They're just going to open with 3 set, and they're passing back to us. We're going to summon out this Sonic Bird here, and that will indeed go through, so we'll grab a Black Illusion Ritual. And then we're just going to attack into their set. If it's something like a Sangan or a Witch, they'll get a Search, and then we can snipe those out of the hand with Comfy and Duo. It's a Germ, so they'll be able to get out 2 more Germs from the deck, and they are indeed going to do that. And then main 2, we actually do have a bit of a consideration here, as we might not necessarily want to play both of our hand rips here. We might want to save one for later. Yes, we do clear out their entire hand if we use both, but I do think that it's probably fine just to go for Confiscation to see hand knowledge, and then if they do have other bad stuff in hand, we could Delinquent Duo the remaining stuff away. I think this is a bit of a misplay here, but I do it anyways, as my hand is really powerful, so I feel safe doing this. We're going to try and hit some good stuff here. They lose a Bazoo and a Mask, and we could go for the Comfy here. We are thinking about it, but I think instead we're just going to pass back to them. We don't set anything, as we figure that since they didn't do anything to our Sonic Bird when it attacked in, their 2 back row might be like spell and trap removal, and we don't really want to lose any of this. So we're going to pass back to them. They're going to bring out a Mystic Tomato, which is really annoying, but it looks like they got that off the top, so the Comfy wouldn't have mattered either way there. And they're going to crash that into our Sonic Bird. They'll get out another monster here. They'll pick another Mystic Tomato, and they'll be able to get in for 3,400 damage here. That's pretty worrying for us, but not much we can do about it. We've got the Kaiku for next turn. They're going to fire a Time Seal so we don't draw here, which, you know, is fine. We're happy with our hand. We're just going to bring out this Kaiku. They're going to be fine with that. We're going to attack into the Giant Germ here. They've got a Karibo as the last card in hand. Very interesting. We could potentially snipe that out of the hand with Confiscation, but I felt like that was fine. We're going to set this Call of the Haunted here and pass back to them. They unfortunately do have the Mystical Space Typhoon indeed for this, so we will lose that Call of the Haunted. Maybe we should have set the Comfy as bait, but we didn't think of it. We do get a bit punished for it. They're going to switch their monster defense, pass back to us, and we draw a Premature Burial. We could use that, but I don't really feel the need to yet. So we're just going to attack into the Germ. We do take 500 here, which is a little bit worrying as we are dropping down pretty low. But I do think that we have to just clear monsters from their side of the field, and we don't want to let them get out like a Sangan or a Witch. They're going to set one and fire Relinquished Duo, which is really unfortunate. We've got some very good cards in hand here. They're going to snipe the Monster Reborn, which is the best of the cards in hand. And we're just going to discard this Premature Burial as we are at really low life points, so we don't necessarily want to use it. We're going to pass back, or they're going to pass back to us, not the other way around. And we're just going to attack into their set. It's a Witch, so they'll be able to search a monster here. And they're going to grab a Gemini Elf. And we do indeed have to Confiscation that out of their hand, as if they summon the Elf, they do just win next turn. So we're just going to set this Black Illusion Ritual as a bluff, as we don't want to let them just pop off and have nothing to do with it. They're going to think about this a bit, and they've got a Snatch Steal, so that will indeed be the end of the game. So, pretty good game one. Maybe if we had played it a little bit differently, things could have turned out different for us. But I think ultimately we played pretty well there. I am kind of disappointed that we didn't actually get to bring out Relinquished at any point in the game. We were kind of low on monsters throughout that. But hopefully we'll be able to bring out Relinquished in game 2. I think for siding, I didn't make too many changes here. I think I just kept things largely the same. And we are going to go into game 2, and let's hope that this is a little bit better for us than game 1. We are going first here, so hopefully that comes up. And we draw Confiscation, which is, Confiscation and Pot of Greed. Oh my goodness, we've got Confiscation, Duo, and Pot in the opener. That's crazy. We're going to go for a Duo first, and this game probably should be over because we've got Imperial Order as well. We snipe a Raigeki on top of all of this. That's just crazy. We use Confi and look at their hand, and this is kind of weird. But I think I do want to snipe the Sangan out of hand because we do have Imperial Order for the Reborn. We know they don't have a Mystical Space Typhoon in hand. If they do draw one, then that could be pretty rough for us. But I think ultimately right now, we just want to send the Sangan and hope to negate the Reborn next turn. But after that, we'll just set the Sangan, set this Imperial Order, and pass back to them. We don't want to provide something to let them crash their germs into. And if they've got Nobleman of Crossout, we can use Imperial Order on that as well. So it's not the worst thing for us. They're going to think about this a bit. Set one, set another, and pass back to us. We draw a Snatch Steal, which is pretty good. We're just going to bring out this Sonic Bird to grab a Black Illusion Ritual here. And we could just go for the Black Illusion Ritual, and it looks like we are going to do that. As long as they don't have Imperial Order, we're fine here. Unfortunately, they do indeed have the Imperial Order. So that means we won't be able to tribute off our Sangan and take their germ, which is unfortunate, but we will still be able to attack in here. So we'll take 500 from the germ, and they'll bring out 2 more. But we can clear 1 with the Sonic Bird here. And now if they crash their germ into our Sangan, it's a lot worse for them than it would have been before. So they will lose that germ. We'll pass back to them. They are going to let their Imperial Order die. And they are going to go for a Monster Reborn. We've got the Imperial Order for that, so they'll shut that off. They'll set one, switch the germ to defense, and pass back to us. We draw Mystic Tomato, which is pretty nice. And given that we don't really want to use up our cards here, I think that we can keep the Imperial Order on field just to insulate ourselves a little bit. We're going to go to battle here, attack over the germ with the Sangan, and then attack in directly with the Sonic Bird. So they'll drop down a little bit more. We'll set the tomato here as we don't really have to worry about Dark Hole because we've got the Imperial Order up. Of course, they could have Dust Tornado Dark Hole, but if they do, then we're perfectly fine because we get a Sangan to search. We do have Reborn, so I feel good about this. They're going to bring out a Gemini Elf here, and they're going to fire a Time Seal, which is perfectly fine by us. Our hand is pretty great. They're going to attack in to the bird here, dropping us down by 500, and they'll pass back to us. We don't draw because Time Seal, and we're going to do some quick math, and unfortunately, we don't quite have lethal damage, but we are 100 off, so I do think it's worth going just all in here. They're down to 1 card, so there's not too much risk in doing this. We're going to Reborn their Kaiku, Snatch Steal their Elf, flip up this Tomato, and attack in, dropping them down to 100. We'll banish the Sangan and the Germ, given that they are likely on a Dark Necrofear deck, given all the Fiends they're playing. And we're just going to say, you know, if you got something here, you got something, but there isn't much that can win you the game from this position at 100 life points. They're going to go up to 1100 here in the standby phase, so it's not as dire as it may seem, and they're going to set one pass back to us. If that's Mirror Force, then that's obviously unfortunate. So we're going to switch this Mystic Tomato to defense and attack in here. We're not playing Cannon Soldier in the deck, so, you know, if we were playing Cannon Soldier, we could have also switched, like, the Elf to defense or the Kaiku, and then search Cannon Soldier off the Sanyan if they had Mirror Force. But it's fine. I think we still win in a couple turns here. Anyways, they do indeed have the Mirror Force. We get a search here. We're going to grab a Sonic Bird because why not? And then main 2 will set a Mirror Force pass back to them. We could have summoned out the Sonic Bird here just to get the Black Illusion Ritual search. So that way if we draw it next turn, it's not really a brick. But I feel fine doing this. They're going to Pot of Greed here. Draw 2. And that will just be the end of the game. So that game 2 there, we did have the potential to go into Relinquished if they did have any way to recover. But we didn't even need it. The deck was just good enough on its own. So, you know, it's kind of unfortunate that we didn't get to bring it Relinquished there either. But that is how it is. And as this game does show, Imperial Order can shut down your combo, which is always very unfortunate. But let's hope in game 3 here we can actually show off Relinquished. We are keeping the deck largely the same. I think we might side out of the hand rips for another Faith, a Bazoo, and maybe some Noblemans of Crossout, given that they are on Germs, which they do want to set. And if we Nobleman a Germ, then that's pretty good. So I think we do side in some stuff here to deal with their Necrofear strategy. But it looks like, yep, and it looks like we did indeed. We've got the Nobleman of Crossout in the opener. So, you know, if we had kept the hand rips in here, then maybe this would have been a pretty good turn. But I still feel like this is a pretty good opening hand. But they're going to go first here. They're just going to start by setting 3 and passing back to us. I feel perfectly fine about that. We're going to summon out a Gemini Elf here, just getting a bit aggressive. Fire a Nobleman of Crossout on their set. It's an Earthbound Spirit, which is a pretty neat fiend tech there. And that is pretty good against our deck, as it can have a bit of difficulty getting over 2k defenders. Although the one Bazoo in our deck can help with that a little bit. We'll just set a Mystical Space Typhoon here. They've got Time Seal. Honestly, that's fine with us. If they clear the Elf, we've got follow-up, so this is perfectly fine. They're going to fire a Snatch Deal. We've got the Mystical Space Typhoon to deal with that. They're going to fire a Fissure, so that will clear the Elf. They're going to Forceful Sentry back a card into our deck, so they're going to send back the Sangan here. And that will indeed go back in the deck, get shuffled up. And they're just going to pass back to us, so it looks like they don't really have any monsters here. So we're just going to get aggressive, summon out the Elf, attack in. They do have Karibo to protect themselves from that, but that's ultimately fine. We've still got a pretty good board presence here. They're going to fire another Time Seal, which, you know, could be annoying if they draw, like, Bazoo exactly, but other than that, I feel pretty good about this. And they're going to draw, set a monster, pass back to us. And honestly, I feel pretty fine about this. We could attack into their monster there, but if it's like a Witch of the Black Forest, then they get a search off that, so I don't really feel like I want to do that. I think what I'd rather do instead is just set the Magician of Faith in hand to get back a Nobleman to deal with their set next turn. So it's a bit passive of a play here, and there are things that do punish it, but I do think it's the right move. They're going to draw here, summon out a Gemini Elf of their own, and they're going to get in to our Gemini Elf here, crash that, and pass back to us. And honestly, that's a pretty good outcome for us. We draw Mystic Tomato, which is nice. We're going to flip up this Magician of Faith, grabbing back the Nobleman, and Noblemaning their set, which is a Mystic Tomato of their own. We're going to summon out our Mystic Tomato, attack in for 1700 here, and pass back to them. And I'm feeling pretty good about this. We're kind of both in a top deck war now, but I feel like we've got the advantage here. So they're going to set 1, pass back to us, and we draw Witch of the Black Forest, which is pretty good. We'll summon that out. Switch the Magician of Faith to defense because our clock doesn't change if the Magician of Faith attacks in or if it doesn't. And if they do have Mirror Force, it's nicer to have a defender on field. So we're going to attack in for 2500 here. And that's pretty good. Drops it down to 1900. The end of the game is nigh, and it looks like that is indeed the end of the game. They just drew a Jinzo, and they just had an MST set. So that will just be the end of the game. So, unfortunately, we didn't really get to show off Relinquished itself here. We did have the opportunity to make it game 2 potentially as a follow-up, if they did indeed have more plays. But other than that, the deck didn't really get to show off what it can do. So we did actually feature another match here, which I will get into in a second. But I do want to mention that I do think this game is a good showing of why I'm not the biggest fan of Time Seal, because it doesn't really do anything when you're behind. It can deprive the opponent of a draw, sure, but oftentimes your opponent will still have other resources to use outside of that. So I'm not the biggest fan of the card. I get why people play it. It's fine. It's okay. It's not going to be terrible. But I feel like most of the time it's just very underwhelming, and it doesn't really do much to help you out of a tricky spot. But anyways, Time Seal rant over. Let's dive in to the next game. Okay, we've got our second game here against 2003-57-931, who showed up on the channel a bit in the past, hasn't been on for a while, so glad to have them back on the channel. And we are playing Relinquished, unclear what they're playing, but let's find out. As a note, this was a rated match in the Format Library Discord. It's a great place to find games if you're into Android format. And, so this is very likely going to be up against a Beast Spellcaster deck. Unlike a Dark Necrofear deck. And, I mean, this will be a good test to see if Relinquished can actually stand up to the big boys. But they're going to send 5 cards here, 3 Jar of Greeds, a Tomato, and a Mystical Space Typhoon. Given that we have 2 equip cards in hand that we don't want to get MST'd, and we don't really have many ways to deal with Mystic Tomato, I think we do want to give them a Jar here. So we are indeed going to give them a Jar. They're going to set 2, set a 3rd, and pass back to us, and I feel pretty good about this. That Jinzo is also very nice. We're going to summon out Gemini Elf, and they're going to trap hole it. And now we could potentially go for a premature burial here to bring back the Elf and get aggressive. But I don't really think there's much reason to do that. Given their graveyard, I feel like they probably have set like a Mystic Tomato or a Recruiter. If they did set like a Magician of Faith or something, then they can just get back Mystical Space Typhoon, clear the premature burial. And so, I mean, I feel like there's no reason to really go for the premature burial play here. We are going to think about it, though, and we're just going to pass back to them. We'll save premature for maybe, like, tributing out Jinzo later. But they fire a Delinquent Duo, which is very unfortunate. For us, this could be pretty bad. They are indeed going to snipe the premature burial, so that's really tough. I think we do actually want to discard the Relinquished here, as we do have other ways to get to the other Relinquished in our deck. And Snatch Shield plus Jinzo is a good enough combo that we do want to keep it online. Unfortunately for us, our opponent did a big brain play and actually set the Magician of Faith here. So they will be able to get back this Delinquent Duo. There really wasn't much of a way to anticipate this play happening last turn. You know, using Premat on the Elf would have been really good if we had known this was coming, but there wasn't really a way to predict this. So kind of unfortunate. They're going to hit a Snatch Steal, and we're just going to send the Jinzo because it's kind of a brick otherwise now. They're going to fire Jar of Greed to draw another and summon out a Witch, and they'll get in for 1,400. And we're feeling really rough here because we don't really have many options. Reborn is pretty good. We could Reborn out one of our monsters here. I don't really think we need to do it yet, though. Kaiku's pretty good on its own. We can attack in to the Magician of Faith here, banish some cards from their graveyard, and then we will pass back to them. They are going to switch the Witch to Defense, set another, fire a Forceful, so maybe we should have set the Monster Reborn. But, I mean, they didn't fire Forceful before, so I figured they probably didn't have it. And Change of Heart's pretty good. We are indeed just going to fire a Change of Heart here. Flip up their monster. It's Magician of Faith, so that's incredibly good. And we got to think about exactly what we want to get here. We could just get super aggressive by, like, getting Change of Heart or Snatch Steal, taking control of their Witch and attacking in. This does deprive them of getting Elf, which can clear our Kaiku. We could also grab Premature Burial to get back Jinzo, which is very good, but that dies to spell and trap removal. So there are a couple different options we could go for. And I think the one that we do settle on is just the Snatch Steal. It doesn't look like they have too much aggressive pressure here. And if they do potentially like summon out like a Kaiku of their own or a Bazoo to clear the Witch to grab an Elf, then I feel like that's still a good trade because we can attack Kaiku into that. So, you know, it's not the worst, and this does get in a lot of damage here. So I feel okay about this. It's very fragile, but we don't really have many other choices here, given that we're at very low card count. So we're going to pass back to them. They draw. And let's see what they do. They're going to gain 1,000 off of the Snatch Steal and fire a Dark Hole, which is very unfortunate. They'll be able to search off the Witch here, and they will indeed get an Elf. And they'll just be able to get aggressive here, potentially. They're going to summon that Elf, Reborn back our Kaiku, and get in for 3,700, and they'll be able to banish cards from our graveyard as well. Very unfortunate. This is a pretty bad situation for us. There are draws that do equalize the situation a little bit here. Confiscation, however, is not one of them. We'll set that as a bluff, but it is probably just the end of the game here, and indeed it will be. So, game one, Not really sure we could have done much about that even if we weren't playing Relinquished. But, you know, that's how Yu-Gi-Oh! Goes sometimes, especially in these older formats. There's so many powerful cards that you can wind up with some pretty degenerate turns like that. But that can happen. If we had played a little bit differently, maybe we could have avoided that. But I don't really think there was a way to predict that easily. So we are just going to go into game 2, keeping the deck largely the same. I think that against a typical Beast Spellcaster deck, it's pretty good. We could potentially side in some Nobleman of Crossout, given that we do know that they're on Magician of Faith. But I think ultimately this is fine. And this is a pretty great hand. We have access to Relinquish right away, which is pretty great, and we've got Mystical Space Typhoon to take care of any pesky Imperial orders. So we're going to just summon out Senju, search out that Relinquish there, set a Mystical Space Typhoon, and pass back to them. They are going to fire a Painful Choice here, and they'll be able to get 5 good ones potentially, and they're going to go with the same 5 that they did last time. I think we do potentially want to give... it's tricky. We could... that's really tricky. We don't want to give them a tomato no matter what, because that can crash into our Senju. But if we give them like Mystical Space Typhoon, they can clear an equip off of Relinquished. However, if they just blind fire the Mystical Space Typhoon, which they might, they'll just hit our Mystical Space Typhoon, which isn't a bad thing. And we don't necessarily want them to get the draw off of Jar of Greed. So I think actually we might give them the Mystical Space Typhoon here. And we do indeed do that. They are going to summon out Bazoo here and attack into our Senju. Yeah, Senju. Manju's not coming out for a while. They're going to set one, pass back to us. And we could just go for a Relinquish play here, sucking up the Bazoo. But that's kind of bad because Relinquish would just be a 1600 attack point monster that things like Kaiku and Gemini Elf can't attack over. And knowing about the Mystical Space Typhoon, that becomes a lot worse. So I think what we might want to do here is just summon out Kaiku and go for that. We can get punished if our opponent did set a bluff here, and unfortunately they did, so we will lose the Kaiku to a Mirror Force, but we've got Dark Hole in case they do want to get more aggressive here, so I feel pretty fine about this. They're going to attack in for 1600 here. Main 2, they're going to set another. We're going to fire Mystical Space Typhoon, hoping to snipe out that Mystical Space Typhoon of their own, but unfortunately it's just a Skull Lair. Skull Lair is very good against this deck, though, so I think it is probably good that we hit that. But we just kind of really wanted to get the Mystical Space Typhoon out of the way, given we've got some very powerful cards in hand here. Luckily, we draw Bazoo, which can deal with the Bazoo of their own. We're just going to banish 2 here, attack into theirs, and drop them down by 600. We are then going to set the Snatch Steal and pass back to them. I figure the Snatch Steal will die to a Mystical Space Typhoon anyways, so we do know that they've got the Mystical Space Typhoon, but I feel like this is still fine. They are indeed going to hit the Snatch Steal with the Mystical Space Typhoon, fire a Forceful Sentry, and take the Dark Hole from our hand. It's an interesting choice, but I guess they figure that, you know, we can have Relinquished online pretty much any way we want to here, and they'd rather just take the Dark Hole. We happen to draw the Dark Hole again, and, you know, I did shuffle. I checked the logs, and I did shuffle the deck, and I think you could probably see that in this replay here, that the deck did shuffle. It's just Dark Hole found its way to the top again, so that's pretty nice. We'll summon the Sonic Bird, grab a Black Illusion Ritual here, and we're just going to get in for a bunch of damage. We're just going to banish 1 off of the Bazoo to still have a monster engraved, to potentially bring back later, but I still feel pretty good about this. We're going to attack in for 3,300 and set the Black Illusion Ritual as a bluff, pass back to them. We've got the other Black Illusion Ritual in hand, so I feel like this is fine to bait out another Mystical Space Typhoon. And it baits out a Heavy Storm, which is still pretty good. They're going to summon this Kaiku here, attack in to our bird, banish 2, and it's a little bit unfortunate. They're going to pass back to us, and we draw Change of Heart, which is pretty nice. We could just have the game on lock here. We're going to Change of Heart the Kaiku here, and we're going to banish 1, because unfortunately, banishing 2 won't actually win us the game here. If we had pumped up our Bazoo by 1 more the previous turn, I think it might have, but unfortunately, we were playing a bit conservatively, and it comes back to bite us here. So, unfortunately, they will get their Kaiku back at the end of the turn here. We could just go for Black Illusion Ritual and tribute off the Kaiku, but I feel like that's pretty bad, so I don't necessarily want to do that. And we're just going to pass back to them. We do have Dark Hole, worst case scenario, and we do have Black Illusion Ritual to bring out Relinquished as well. They're going to bring out a Gemini Elf, which will be able to crash with our Bazoo here, and they'll be able to get in for 1800 with the Kaiku. Maybe this is another reason why we should have banished the Change of Heart as well, but I was thinking more of Magician of Faith later on. We do have Dark Hole to deal with this later, so feel fine with this. We're going to fire the Dark Hole, summon a Mystic Tomato that dies to Torrential Tribute, unfortunately, and we'll pass back to them. Luckily, we do have Relinquished online as long as we get a monster, so that's pretty good. They're going to bring out a Mystic Tomato attack in for 14, pass back to us. We draw Sangan, and that will indeed be the end of the game. We'll summon the Sangan just to get the search in case they do have something like a Karibo, but they do admit defeat, and that will be the end of the game. So I think that game does show how Relinquished has sort of shifted in this format to become less of like a continuous boss monster that you keep around on field and more of just like an endgame bomb that you drop to try and finish off your opponent, which is a bit unfortunate as this is like at its heart a control deck, and there are probably better monsters in this format to bring out and serve that purpose than Relinquished. But it's not terrible, and we were able to win with Relinquished there, so that's really cool to see. But you know, it is kind of unfortunate. We're going to go into game 3 here, and we are going to be going second here as they did win. No, they didn't win. We won, as we won last game. So they'll be able to go first here. They're just going to set 2 and pass back to us, and Pot of Greed's a pretty good opener. Well, Pot of Greed drawing 2. And we draw some good ones here. We're going to go for the Senju, grab a Relinquished just to grab our pieces to hand, and then attack into their set there. It is a Witch of the Black Forest. They're going to grab a Kaiku from deck to hand. Main 2, we're then going to set 2 back row. They unfortunately do have the Mystical Space Typhoon to snipe the Waboku here, but we still do have our Mirror Force to clear whatever they bring out. We feel pretty good about that. They're going to go for a Painful Choice, and let's see what they send here. They're going to go for 3 Jar of Greeds, a Mystical Space Typhoon, and a Tomato here. I think here we want to give them the Jar, as we don't want them to Mystical Space Typhoon our Mirror Force. And Mystic Tomato, if they do have some way to clear the Mirror Force, could be really disastrous for us. They're going to bring out this Kaiku, and they're going to attack into our Senju here. We could potentially save the Mirror Force, but I feel like we might as well just fire it now. We don't necessarily want to lose the Pot and Greed in Graveyard, given that we do have the Magician of Faith in hand. So I feel like it is best to do that. They're going to set 2, pass back to us. We draw Witch of the Black Forest, which is really good. We'll summon that out and just try and get in for 25 here. And we do manage to connect. So that'll drop them down by 2,500. And we're just going to pass back to them in case they do a spell and trap removal. We don't want to lose our Change of Heart or Raigeki to that. They're going to fire a Pot of Greed here and draw 2. And they are going to summon out another Kaiku. This is a bit unfortunate for us. They can indeed clear our Pot of Greed here, which they will likely do. Yep, they do indeed get rid of the Pot of Greed and the Mirror Force there. They're going to Jar of Greed to draw 1, and then they're just going to pass back to us. And I feel pretty good about this. If we Change of Heart their Kaiku, we actually can get in 4,700, which drops them down to 800, which shuts off 2 of their hand control cards. So I feel that might be the play to make, so we are indeed going to go for that. We're going to summon out this Kaiku, Change of Heart their Kaiku, and try getting in for a ton of damage. That will indeed connect, so we can also banish 4 cards from the graveyard, which is super nice. And we do have the Waboku in hand to potentially, you know, protect our monsters next turn, although I'm not sure we'll need it. They're going to get back the Kaiku here, and they're going to keep the Kaiku on field. That was a misclick, I think. They're going, oh, they are indeed going to send it. They're going to bring out a Jinzo here, and I feel perfectly fine about this. We've got Raigeki in hand to deal with that. They'll attack in to the Kaiku here, deal 600, pass back to us. We draw Gemini Elf, but no need to even summon that. We'll just Raigeki their Jinzo away, attack in for 1100 here. And that will indeed be the end of the game. So, you know, unfortunately, throughout both of these matches, all 6 of these games, we only really got to use Relinquished once, which is kind of rough, as I did want to show off the Relinquished combo a little bit more. But I do think that this is indicative of how the deck plays in this format. It's just a lot worse in a much more aggressive format like this one when compared to things like Imperial and Treasure format. So I do think that the deck has gotten a lot worse in this format, despite not like really losing any cards or having things gain like super heavy Relinquished hate against it. I just think it's an unfortunate casualty of the way that the meta shapes out. But what do you all think? Do you think that Relinquished is actually a lot better than I'm giving it credit for? Or do you think that I just got lucky in these games and it's actually just a garbage tier deck? Let me know down in the comments below. I look forward to discussing with you as always. And until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.